for more students to join. All right. So let's start. It's sad to see that only 21 students have joined till now. So see, although I told you that we have finished the syllabus, we'll be discussing quite a lot of practice questions in these sessions, and there will be a good chance that you will see some of the modifications of these questions in your end sem exam. All right. So let's start with the solutions of the quizzes which we had yesterday, and the performance was average. I won't say it was bad or it was good. So let's talk about the questions one by one. I hope my screen is visible. All right. Okay, so third question, it was, I would say, the easiest question, but most of you got confused. Like almost 60% of you have answered it as R by 2. See, what is meant by R, right? That matters. So when I explained you this in the class, I was using this term R for something else, and in this question, this R tells you something else. So can someone tell me what was the R when we discussed it in the class? We computed R in the class, right? When we were talking about the disk rotations. At that time, we said that R was the time taken for one rotation. So in case R was the time taken for one rotation, then your rotational latency would be R by 2. In that case, it was correct. But if you look at the question here, it says that your platter can make R rotations in 1 unit. Right? So you actually have to compute it. How much time does it take for it to make one rotation? So it makes one rotation in 1 by R time units, right? And hence what is the rotational latency? It is 1 by R divided by 2, which is 1 by 2R. Okay. This one also, most of you said shortest seek time first. So see, the question was which of the disk scheduling algorithms considers both seek time as well as the rotational delay. So as shortest seek time, as the name implies, it's only looking forward to optimize the seek time, basically minimize the seek time, right? And that is what it is. It just looks at that you should traverse your tracks in such a way such that you can, so if you are at one particular track, the next track which you choose should be the closest to it so that you have the shortest seek time. So it's a greedy algorithm. But see, it doesn't consider rotational delay. So rotational delay is the movement of the platter, the rotation of the platter. It doesn't consider that. So we discussed in the class that it was actually shortest positioning time, which considers both of these. So none of your algorithms, first come, first serve, scan, see, scan, look, see, look, or shortest seek time first, none of these consider your rotational delay. All right. Fifth question, most of you have got it correct. Well done. So if a disk address is of n bytes and each block holds 2 to the power m bytes of data, you had to compute the size of the disk. Right, so disk address is of n bytes, which means 8n bits. With 8n bits, we can address 2 raised to the power 8n blocks. And now each of the block has 2 raised to the power m bytes of data. So your total data becomes 2 raised to the power 8n into 2 raised to the power m, which is 2 raised to the power 8n plus m. So always remember that whenever you do addressing, in the case of disk, address is done according to the blocks, right? Similar to how it is done for words in your main memory. Okay. allocation policy is best suited for sequentially accessing a read-only tape drive. Again, most of you have got it correct. It is contiguous memory allocation. Why? Because we are not doing any rewriting, right? So there will never be a case that you'll suffer from the problem of external fragmentation. So that's why you can use contiguous memory allocation, because you are told that you are never going to do a write. Furthermore, all the accesses which you are doing, they are sequential. So it's best to store your data in contiguous sectors. Right. This one also, most of you have got it correct. So consider a hard disk of 4 terabyte having block sizes of 1 KB. So considering index memory allocation, what will be the size of each entry in an index block? So total, your hard disk is 4 terabyte. Your block size, so let's say these are the blocks. Each block is 1 kilobyte. So what is the number of blocks? Your number of blocks become 4 into 2 to the power 40 divided by 2 to the power 10, which is 2 to the power 32, right? Now, if you look at index block, each entry in an index block is nothing but the address of a disk location. So indirectly, we had to find how many bits are required to address a disk. So we required 32 bits, which is 4 bytes. Next question was a bit tricky. Only two of you have got a correct answer to this. So how much space will be lost? So let's say you have, in the above question itself, if you had to store a file of 127.5 KB and you are using an indexed location, one level indexing, how much space is lost in internal fragmentation? So let's go up. So see, you have 127 KB, right? Or you have 127.5 KB. So first of all, you will be storing this data into blocks, and then those blocks can be anywhere. So how many blocks will we need for storing 127.5 KB? You can type in the chat window. Anyone? How many blocks will you need? 128, right? So 127 blocks will be completely full and 128 block will be half full. So you will be using 128 blocks, but out of these 128 blocks, your last block is not full. It is half filled, right? So you are losing 0.5 KB there to internal fragmentation. So 0.5 here, but you will lose more to internal fragmentation. Where? In your index block. So you are doing indexing for all these 128 blocks. So let's say this is your index block. Your index block is again 1 KB in size. So how many entries can it hold? Each entry is 4 bytes, right? We have already computed. So how many entries can be here? 1 kilobyte divided by 4 byte, right? So 2 to the power 10 by 2 to the power 2, which is 2 to the power 8, right? These many entries you have. So you can have these many entries, but how many entries do we actually have? We have only these many entries because other blocks are not required by the file. So only 2 raised to the power 7 entries are full, where you can have 2 to the power 8 entries. So can I write 2 to the power 8 as 2 to the power 7 into 2? Right, so first 2 to the power 7 entries, they are in use. The other 2 to the power 7 entries, they are not in use because file is not that big. So all these 2 to the power 7 entries, they are being wasted. How much space will these 2 to the power 7 entries will take? Each entry is 4 byte. Right, so 2 to the power 7 into 2 to the power 2 byte, which is 2 to the power 9 byte. You can write it as 0.5 kilobyte. So your 0.5 kilobyte is lost to internal fragmentation in your file blocks, and your 0.5 KB is lost to internal fragmentation in your index block. So a total, you lose 1 KB in internal fragmentation. Any doubt here? So feel free to unmute yourself and speak, or you can type your query in the chat window. All right, let's move forward. This question, 9th and 10th, we had discussed in the class. This question is as it is. What was done in the class, I have just placed that in the quiz. Still, not all of you have got it correct. Rather, the first one, I don't know, only 14% of you have got it correct. We discussed it. So whenever you have a sequential workload, right? So we discussed that in the case of a sequential workload, there is no movement of read-write head required. There is no movement of rotation required, right? So as your disk is rotating, you do not need to move your read-write head at all. And as your disk is rotating, you can do the computations at the same time. So you do not have to wait for some other sector to come below your read-write head. You just have to read the next sector because it's sequential workload. So in the case of sequential workload, your input output rate is actually equal to your data transfer rate, which is 125 MB per second. And this was the answer. In the case of a random workload, you have to look after what is the seek time, what is the rotational delay, and you have to add them. Right. So this also only 1/4 of the class have got it correct. I don't know why most of you answered 105. I don't know the reason for that. Okay. So how will we solve this? So you have a random workload of 4 KB. So see, for reading any random workload of 4 KB, you do not know in which track it will be there and in which sector it will be there. So first of all, you have to come to the right track, then to the right sector. Coming to the right track, you will add the average seek time here. Coming to the right sector, you will add the rotational latency. So on an average, it takes you R by 2, right? In case R is the time for one rotation, then it takes you R by 2 time units to come to the correct sector. And then you are going to do the data transfer. So whatever time is required for your data transfer. So if you compute it here, your seek time is already given to you, which is 4 milliseconds on an average. If you compute your rotational latency, you can actually figure out that it will take you 4 milliseconds for one rotation. So 2 milliseconds, let me write down the units also, for half a rotation. So that is your rotational latency. Input output time for 4 KB will be negligible. So for 125 megabytes, it is 1 second. You only have 4 KB. So even if you compute this time in milliseconds, it will be negligible. So this value will be close to 6 milliseconds, right? So for a workload of 4 KB, you are requiring this input output time of 6 milliseconds. So for 4 KB, it takes you 6 milliseconds. Since you are asked the answer in megabytes per second, you have to compute how much time will it take for 1 megabyte. How much time will it take? 6 milliseconds divided by 4 kilobyte into 1 megabyte milliseconds. If you want to convert it in second, so convert it in second, divide it by 1000, right? And you can actually approximate this 1000 as 1024. So this value, it is almost equal to, I'm going to write this 1000 as 2 raised to the power 10 here, right? So now see, 2 raised to the power 10 here, 2 raised to the power 10 here, 2 raised to the power 20 here. All this cancels out. So you have 6 by 4 seconds for 1 megabyte, right? And what is that? That is your 0.66. So that was the answer. Okay, any queries in this quiz? I'll soon upload the marks in the shared sheet. So the maximum marks for this quiz is like 9 out of, I think it was a 15 points, and average was 7 or 8. All right. So what we'll do now is let's practice some more questions on disk scheduling and file input output. So give me a second. I have a practice sheet. I'll give it to all of you and then let's discuss these questions one by one. Give me a second. I'll attach it in the chat window. Give me a second. I have to rename this file. Let's see who solves these questions first. All right, so the file is in the chat window. You can download it and we'll discuss these questions one by one. I'll also open it on my system. All right, so can you tell me the rotational latency for the first question? So let's take it slowly and then we'll try to answer it. So you are given the average access time. Access time is nothing but here the seek time. So your average seek time is 8 milliseconds. You are given rotational speed and number of sectors per disk. All right. So before solving the A part, can you compute and tell me what is the rotational latency? I'll wait for your answer. So one thing here, see if none of you responds, then I'll actually drop the idea of the review session. So I want all of you to participate actively. If you don't participate, there is no point in discussing these questions. So based on how you guys respond today, I'll decide whether I'll discuss more practice questions with you or not. Otherwise, I'll just give you some practice sheets and then you can practice them at your own side. Tell me, so how much time does it take for half a rotation? Okay, Yuvraj says 4.1662. You can also enter in fraction, that is fine. All right, so let's see. Yes, Snigdha also says 4.1667. Good. So for 7200 rotations, you require 60 seconds or 60,000 milliseconds, right? And we have to compute one rotation. How much time will it take? So you just divide it. So it's 600 divided by 72 milliseconds. Probably I made a mistake here. It should actually be 72,000. So if it is 72,000, you get one less zero here, right? So it is 60 by 72. And if we out of what can we divide it with? So 30 and then 2. Right, something like 5 by 6 milliseconds, right? It comes to what you say, probably 0.4166. Correct. So this becomes your, so what is rotational latency? Still we have only computed how much time does it take for one rotation. So we have to compute for half a rotation. So your rotational latency will become 5 divided by 12 millisecond. Now, I hope that you have the question open at your end. So your first question is, how much time does it take for you to read on an average one sector from the disk? So see, when we say that on an average, how much time does it take to read one sector? We don't know which sector it is, and we do not know currently at which track or which sector we are. So we are just going to assume that the question is same as if you are given any random sector. So you are at any sector at any particular track and you have to read some other sector which can be again in any particular track. How much time will it take? Right. So how much time will it take? So first of all, again, you'll have to move your read write head to bring it to the correct track. That takes you time, which is average seek time, which is already given to you, which is 8 milliseconds, plus how much time does it take for you to rotate the disk and bring the so anyhow disk is rotating, so how much time does it take for your correct sector to bring below the read write head? That is equal to your rotational latency, which is 5 by 12 milliseconds. Now the last part is a bit confusing. So there is some input output time, right? So this is your seek time again. This is your rotational latency, and we are left with the input output time. So we are not given the data transfer rate. So what we can assume is, so see, when your disk rotates, anyhow when it is rotating, sector by sector, you can read and write the data. So what can be the maximum time it takes you to read and write the data? It could be the maximum time that your disk rotates. So whenever one sector it comes below your read write head, there is some time which takes in rotation and there is some time which takes in input output. So we are assuming here that input output time it takes you much less than the rotation time. So as soon as one sector rotates below your read write head, you can complete the input output. So in that sense, if you look at it, there are 63 sectors on one platter. So as soon as your disk makes one rotation, it could do a read write to all these 63 sectors. So if it had to do a read write to all these 63 sectors, how much time it can take? On a maximum, it can take the time which is equal to one rotation. In one rotation, probably it can do many more input outputs also, but in the worst case, it will definitely do one input or one output. So for your 63 sectors, how much time it is taking? 5 by 6 milliseconds, which is the time taken in one rotation. Right, so you can actually write to all the 63 sectors in 5 by 6 milliseconds. What we are given is we are asked for one sector. So for one sector, how much time will it take? Plus 5 by 12 into 63. This is for one sector. Any confusion here? So in case you were given the input output rate, you could directly plug it here. If you are not given, you can compute it based on your disk rotation time. Okay. Next part. So if you understood this part, next part is very easy. So what if you were not to just do read write to one sector, but what if these were 10 contiguous sectors? What will change? So if you have your track here, right, and let's say these are all the sectors on your track. In the first question, you had to do the read write to this particular sector here. So we saw how much time will it take on an average to come to the right track, then to this right sector, and then to do a input or output. Next question is, what if you had to come to this sector and then do a read write for 10 contiguous sectors, right? Some 10 sectors from here. So how much time will it take? Any guesses? So see, what you have to do, first of all, again, you have to come to this first sector over here. Where do you are going to do the first read and write, right? So again, come to the right track and then come to the correct sector. Once you have come to this correct sector here, right, I have just to keep doing read and write. So I read and write on this sector, then anyhow the disk is rotating. You do a read write here, do a read write here, so on and so forth. You do all the read writes. So instead of just one read and write here, you see this was the input and output time for doing an input or output to just one sector. Now we have to do it to 10 sectors. So this time will become, this was for one sector, you need it for 10 sectors. So you multiply a 10 here. Let me know if you have any queries here. So see, the idea is once you come to this sector here, it becomes sequential access. You do not have to care about changing the track. You do not have to care about the disk rotation. You just have to care about input output. All right. Next part, what if these 10 sectors, they were not contiguous? Right. So you do first input output here on this sector here. Now the another sector, it could be again anywhere on any track. And then the another sector, it could be anywhere on any track. Then what would be the answer? So let me write down. This was the answer to your first part. This was the answer to your second part. What will happen in that case? So you come to the first sector and you do a read write here. This is the time you will take, right? We have calculated this on an average, the time it takes you to read one sector. Let me call this entire thing as X. So it takes you X time to read any random sector, right? And after you read this random sector, again the another sector, it could be again anywhere randomly, right? So it will again take you the same time, 8 milliseconds to go to the right track, 5 by 12 milliseconds for your disk to rotate on an average to the correct sector, and the time for input output. So X plus X plus X 10 times. So it will become 10X. So 10 times the answer which you got in the first part. All right. Let's move to the next question. Now you have a file which has 5 blocks from your block 0 to block 4. So assume that it's file control block. So file control block is again nothing but you can sort of compare it. It's same as your inode, right? So Linux and Unix, they use inode for maintaining the information related to a file. In some other operating system, you can call it to be a file control block instead of a process control block. It's similar to that. So your file control block and your directory, they are in memory, and then you have a few assumptions here. So see, there can be many different kind of allocations. So in case you are using contiguous file allocation, what entries will we need to maintain? So your directory, it will need to have a start pointer, which is nothing but from which block your file starts. So your start pointer and a length value, or let's say size, how many blocks are there, or what is the size of the file. Then, so this is in case of contiguous. In case of linked, what do we need? So we need the start pointer, and sometimes you can also store the end pointer. So where is the first block and where is the last block? But we are going to assume that it is a singly linked list, not a doubly linked list. You can have a W also, but that will take more space. And then you have a indexed location, right? So this index block, again, it is somewhere in the disk. So it will tell you where is the first block, where is the second block, where is the third block, so on and so forth. Right? All right. So the question is, how many disk operations are required? So see, this file currently, it is again on hard disk in some particular sectors. So how many disk input output operations are required? So your read and write operations are separate. Your read operation counts as one input output operation. Write also counts as one input output operation. So you have to remove block 2. So to remove block 2, how many disk input output operations do you require? So let's say you stored your file contiguously on your hard disk, and now you need to remove block 2 from here, right? So how many input output will you require? What all you need to do to remove block 2? Anyone? So what do we need to do to remove block 2? Your file, it is contiguously stored in memory, right? So in one particular sector, let's say it's sector 123, you have block 0, sector 124, block 1, 125, block 2, 126, block 3, 127, you have block 4. In that case, what will your directory contain? Your start pointer will be S123 and your size of the file is 5. Now you want to remove block 2. So what all needs to be done? What do you need to do to remove block 2? Do not worry about giving wrong answers. Anyone who wants to try? You people are much more interactive than the other batches. I don't know what happened to you today. No one wants to try also? See, so you have to remove this block, right? From this particular block of the file from your hard disk. It's taking some time to appear on the screen. Let it come and then I'll proceed. So this block at the location in the sector 125, right, that you want to remove from your file, so that you want to delete, what you'll have to do. So after you remove the block, just give me a second, I'll unshare and share my screen again. There's some problem, it's not reflecting. All right. So see, this is the block which you want to delete from the file. So after you remove this block, mm, I don't know, unfortunately, why it's not reflecting. Yeah, it came. So after you remove this block, you should see B0 here, B1 here, B3 here, and B4 here, right? Because your all the allocation, it is done contiguously. So this is sector 123, 124, 125, 126. So what you have to do, you have to overwrite whatever is the content of this block, block 2 in sector 125. Now the content which is sitting here should come here, and the content which is sitting here should come here, because it's your file is anyhow going to be stored contiguously. You should maintain that contiguous pattern. What change you need to do in the directory? So your file it still starts from sector number 123, but the size will become 4 because you have deleted one block, right? So what we need to do, so you need to copy the content of S126 and write it in S125. Similarly, you need to read the content which is in S127 and write it in S126. So read S126, write S126 to S125, and then read S127 and write S127 to S126. Correct? So 2 reads and 2 writes. I'm also doing a change here in your directory structure. We are changing the value of size, but again the question says that your directory it is present in the memory. So that information change that will be made to the memory as of now. So we are only asked how many input output it takes for your disk, right? For your disk, 2 reads and 2 writes. So on a total 4 input output operations. In case you have to write back this to your hard disk, so the idea is your directory information, it is also present in the hard disk. Sometimes to make the changes, it is in the memory. So that time you make the changes in memory and then you can store it back to the hard disk. So we are not considering that part as of now. In case you had to change this in the disk, then there would be one more write here. Right? But as of now, it is 4 input output operations. All right. So can you now tell me, if you understood this, can you now tell me, assume that there is a file which is having n blocks, right? So your block 0, block 1 up to your last block will be bn minus 1. How many input output operations will be required if you want to remove the kth block? So if you want to remove bk, can you compute this and tell me? So just a generalization of the same question which we did. So I'll leave this as a homework exercise. You try this on your own. If there is any query, you can ask me later on. All right. So next question is, what if it was a linked allocation, right? Then what all changes do we have to do? How many input output? So let's just remove all this. So what is happening in a linked allocation is, so please note that for these sessions, I'll upload the recording in your spreadsheet, but not the slides because I'm overwriting the slides. In linked allocation, what you have, so you have a start pointer. So your directory, it will have the pointer to B0, and then B0 would be having another pointer which would be pointing to B1, which would be pointing to B2, which would be pointing to B3, and let's say B3 is pointing to B4. Now, you want to remove B2. Can you tell me what do you need to do? So it's nothing but a linked list question. The previous one, it was nothing but a question based on arrays. So just look at it like a linked list, and if you want to remove B2, what changes would you do? I hope you remember data structures. Linked list is like one of the most important concepts there. Anyone? Can you give me a pseudocode? Okay, Snigdha says 2 into n minus 1 minus k. Yes, Snigdha, very good. So for the previous question, that is the answer. So if you have to remove the kth block, there are actually n minus 1 minus k blocks. After that kth block, you'll have to move all those blocks, right, to a location before that. Correct. So that will be the answer. Very good. All right. What will you do here to remove B2? What pointers will you change? It's just a linked list, right? This is your head. Head is nothing but which is stored here in your directory. This is your tail. Again, tail is stored there in the directory. But given that, let's say it's a singly linked list, and then you have to remove this B2, what will you do? So you only know where is head, and you want to remove the second block. Can you tell me how will you modify the next pointers? So B0's next part is B1, right? B1's next part is B2. B2's next is B3, so on and so forth. Which next pointers will you modify?
Ma'am, if you want to remove B2, then you just modify B1's next.
B1's next, right? Very good. So B1's next should now become B3. But the point is we even don't know where is B1. We don't have the address of B1. So you'll have to do a tracing all from the beginning. We only know where is head. So it's a question similar to, let's say you are given the head of a linked list and you want to remove the kth element of that linked list. How will you proceed? So you will start from head, go to its next, go to next, keep going till you come to that kth node which is to be deleted, and then you do these operations. So in this case, what will you do? So first of all, you have to read B notes next, because B notes next tell you where is B1. So read B note next, which tells you where is B1. Then you also have to read B1 next, which tells you where is B2. Now this B2 needs to be deleted, and what we need to do, we need to set B1 next equal to B3, or I can write this B3 as B2 next. Right, this is the change which we need to do. So I should also know where is B2's next. So you'll have to read the next of B2. After you are done this, I need to write, and what this write operation should do, it should set the next of B1 to be the next of B2. So how many input output operations? 3 reads and 1 write, right, on a total 4. So again, let's generalize this question. Let's say in this linked allocation, you had n blocks in a file, and let me say you wanted to remove the last block. Right? How many input output operations will it take? Say remove last block. Anyone? So think about it. I'll give you one more minute. Otherwise, I'll move on. All right, so think about it. Okay, what about an indexed location? So let's say your index was maintained something like this. Right? This is your index block. So this one tells you where is your block 0, this one tells you block 1, block 2, block 3, block 4. Assume that this index block is stored just like an array. Right, and each entry here is telling you the address of the nth block. It could be anywhere in the memory again. So now I want to remove the block B2. How many operations will it take? So this actually sort of depends on the implementation according to me. So see, one idea is what you can do is you can move all these entries upward. So now B3 becomes B2 and B4 becomes B3. So in that case, the answer becomes similar to what happens in your first part. We are moving everything up in this array. Another way can be you can just mark the pointer here corresponding to null, which sort of tells you that there is no B2 block in this file as of now. Maybe later on you can use it or something like that if you implement it in a different way, right? So if you implement in this particular way, if you implement your index block as an array, it will again become your order of n, right? In case there were n blocks and you have to remove a particular block from your file. In the second case where you are storing your index block in some other way, let's say a hash table or something else, or maybe you could simply mark this b2 as null. In that case it will only take you order 1, just one write. You can say that this block no longer exists. Later on, if someone wants to add a block at that location as block 2, you can again sort of change this value, make it the address of that particular block which you want to remove, which you want to add, sorry. All right. Let's move to the third question. Fourth question is actually straightforward. So what you can do is you can solve your fourth question in your free time, and whatever answer you get, you can type that in the chat window, and I would then verify whether that's correct or not. Okay, coming to the third question. So now you have a inode structure, and this inode structure, as we discussed, how does the struct inode look like? So you have certain part which is reserved for the information or the metadata, and then remaining part of this inode, it tells you where your file blocks are. So you have some direct pointers, some indirect pointers. So it says that you have 16 direct pointers, right? What do your direct pointers do? They tell you where are your blocks located. So the first pointer, it will tell you the address of the first block. Second pointer will tell you the address of the second block. 16th pointer will tell you the address of the 16th block. So these are your data blocks, direct data blocks. All right. After that, you have one single indirect block pointer. So one pointer here, which is indirect. So indirect means it is going to point to a block, but this block, it will be an index block, right? And this index block will give you the addresses of the actual data blocks. So each address in the index block will tell you where are the actual data blocks. So you can have some data blocks here, and then you have one double pointer. Let me write it as double pointer. So what will double pointer give you? Again, one index block. And now each entry of this index block will not be pointing to a data block. It will be pointing to another index block. This is another index block, so on and so forth. This is another index block. And then each entry in this index block, it will be telling you where the data block is. All right. And at the end you have a triple pointer. So again similarly, triple pointer, you have this index block here. Each entry of this index block will give you the address of one more index block, but you have one more level, so each entry in this index block will give you another index block, right? And then you will have these data blocks. So this is the entire structure of your inode. What else is given? Each index table, it has 256 entries. So each index table, it will have 256 entries, that is given. This one also have 256 entries. This one also has 256. Take any index block, it will have 256 entries, and then one block, it can hold 1 kilobyte, right? So one data block here, it can hold 1 kilobyte data. So you are asked what is the maximum size of a file which this operating system will allow. I'll give you some time to solve it. So take your time and solve it. Otherwise, I'm waiting for you for the next 3 minutes for someone to tell me the answer. Otherwise, I'll take it up in the next class. All right, you can give me an approximate answer. That would be okay. So some 0.1, 0.2, you can sort of ignore that if some value is very small. Okay, and I'm once again repeating, so for all of those of you who have agreed to review a particular topic, I have sent you an email asking you for the date. If you haven't received me, you can write back to me. If you have received that, respond to it by tomorrow. Otherwise, I'll randomly allocate you some date. And then if you do not appear on that date, then that's fine. We'll discuss something else on that day. But then you won't have any bonus marks. All right, so I'll stop here. I'm still here, still waiting for the answer. Yes, Mihika, these will be class hours only. So you will be giving your review sessions in the class hours, and after each review session, I'll discuss some practice questions on the same topic which you have reviewed. If we do not get the time for that, I'll discuss those questions during the lab sessions. If we have very less review sessions, then I'll discuss the practice question in the regular sessions only. But your review sessions will be during the class hours. So you can take any of the days, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. We have 6 sessions left. But I have updated like some dates in the same spreadsheet which I shared with you. I can actually tell you, just give me a second. So one review session is already, date has been finalized for December 9. So don't pick up December 9, and yes, other than December 9, you can pick any of the dates. Okay, so we will end the session here. I also have to leave. I have a meeting in the department. So what you can do is for question number 3 and question number 4, you can type your answers in the chat window, right? Whenever you solve them. So you have a class right now. Later in the day or in the next 3 days or 4 days, whenever you solve them, you can type the answer in the chat window. All right, so we'll stop here.